Hello everybody, and welcome to another build video. A lot of people were asking me, after I did my previous build video, which was on a really weird conceptual elementalist that uses conditions and was like a massive glass cannon, and in my opinion not that good. A lot of people did ask though after that, what do I usually use while playing the game? The last time I really talked about what I do while just generally playing PvE was like right after launch. So, and yes, my opinions on what is good in PvE have changed a lot in that time, and I don't run the same build that I used to. So a lot of people were asking, hey, can you demonstrate what kind of build you run now on an elementalist? And I'd be happy to show you guys. I kind of call this a bit of an arcane elementalist, namely owing to the fact that it uses 3 arcane skills and has many traits, and its gear are all built around the idea of using these arcane skills. A fact about arcane skills before we start everything: they will always crit. You might not, if you don't read closely the text, then you might not have ever understood this. They always crit no matter what. So the idea of this build is deal very, very high crit damage. Don't build for too much precision or crit chance. Build very high crit damage and rely on other things to make sure those crits come out, namely using arcane skills, as well as a new sigil that's been fixed recently, which has been kind of my latest addition. This has been born out of a lot of play of the game and different builds that I've ran. You'll see a bit of my old Churning Earth Spiker build, if you remember that, kind of coming in through here, except this is very sustainable and it's pretty good. So talking about crit damage, my crit damage is 110%, which is high. This is as high as I think you're gonna really get. In fact, it's as high as you can get. This is all gear building around crits. Not all gear building around being a glass cannon though. A lot of it's defensive stuff. A lot of it has its major stat as defensive stuff. But it's 110%. Yours might not necessarily be so high. That doesn't matter though. I will demonstrate to you guys what I've got though. So for the armor itself, I've got berserker stuff: power, precision, crit damage. For the weapons, I've got power, vitality, crit damage. For the top row of my jewelry, basically I'm using Cavaliers. Cavaliers is great stuff. It gives you toughness, power, and crit damage. Very nice. Your other option is precision, power, and crit damage, with power being the major stat rather than toughness. Go with the toughness. You need to be able to survive. This is a dagger build, so you're going to be up front, and you need some kind of sustain, honestly. Just to clarify to you guys, there are 2 versions of this build. I don't kind of run around the entire game always playing on one build. I actually swap it up. If I'm doing kind of basic, running around, map completion, doing events for the dailies, all that kind of stuff, helping people out in just the regular, normal PvE environment, I run this, which is a much more offensive build. There's also a very slight variation which I run when I'm basically in high-end fractals. That's the only time I really run it. You can get away with it in dungeons too, this power version. I'll show you both and why I feel like it's very important to swap up. But this is the power version right now. 110 crit damage. That would be a flat 100. But I've also got, as a part of my setup, I'm always eating... and I wanted to eat it here on this video to demonstrate to you guys Tarragon stuffed poultry, which gives you not Tarragon stuffed poultry, plates of truffle steak dinner, which gives you 10% critical strike damage at all times. So it's an extra 10%, and for 30 seconds after you've killed someone, you get an extra 200 power, which is nice because, as you can see here, my power isn't actually at 2000, so it's not that high. You'll see I'm not in fire magic at all. I think it's fine though, because I prefer the damage scale is better if you go through crits and percentage based scaling rather than just through power, which tapers off at higher levels as far as I'm concerned. So those are kind of my stats. Go with Cavaliers if you can. I've got an Ancient Carcass Shell here just because I like the Ancient Carcass Shell. Everything here's got Ruby Jewels because there's no Cavalier Jewels. And then for my bottom row, again, if you don't have Ascended or you don't want to go for Ascended, then again, just go for Cavaliers. That's what I used before I had this. But I have the Ascended versions of Cavalier stuff, which would be Rurik's Royal Signet Ring, Power, Toughness, Crit Damage, Adalbern's Royal Signet Ring, Power, Toughness, Crit Damage, and Jarlis Ironhammer's Crest, Power, Toughness, Crit Damage. All in all, gives you 100% critical damage bonus in combination with our trait. So that's my gear. For the sigils, I've got a Sigil of Intelligence. Your next attack after swapping this weapon while in combat has a 100% critical hit chance. This was only recently fixed for the Elementalist, and when it was, it made this build really come into its own. It's very nice. It allows you to get a very, very strong opening on enemies. And also, I've got a Centurion's Claw of Force here. You could go with a Bloodlust, but I'll explain that later. What I'm going to do with this video is just highlight everything I'm doing for those of you who want to kind of copy it. And at the end, I'll start actually talking about variations. So here, for my traits, I've gone 0 in fire, 25 air, 0 in earth, 25 water, 20 arcane. And you might think, how is this a damaging build? There's not much in the damaging trees, which would be namely the top two and partly the middle one. Well, water magic's incredibly overpowered because it lets you go into a really defensive tree, but take really offensive major slots, which is awesome. So I've gone with 25 air for weak spots, cause vulnerability on critical hits. As I say, crits are kind of a bit of a theme of this build. That's going to be useful for proccing something in water magic too. I've gone with auras grant me fury and swiftness so that I do have that little bit higher chance to be critting at all times during fights, and I've got arcane lightning, which means when I use arcane abilities I gain even more critical hit damage. So I talked about having 110% here. Really, in fights we're at 119%. Not the whole time, this won't last forever, but when it matters we'll be at 119%, which is nice. Very, very high value there to actually have on a character. So those are the traits I've gone with there. Also, never ignore the middle trait here, 15. This is so powerful, guys. It's really, really strong. If you're ever deciding, oh, do I want to go 10 in earth magic or just a little bit more, go that little bit more. This is so much stronger than the 15 in fire or the 15 in earth, because these only damage people around you, and this has got like ridiculous range on it, and when it crits it's very high single target damage. It's really nice. So for water magic, the traits I've chosen here will be familiar to you if you've seen my Channing Earth nuking build. We have got here 20% more damage to vulnerable foes while we're in water achievement, and I deal 10% more damage while my health is above 90%. This particular trait here has really nice synergy with the runes I've chosen, which are crit damage runes. These are the runes of the Scholar, and the last tier of these runes gives you 10% more damage while your health's above 90%. So that and the water magic trait here mean that when I'm engaging someone, I'm doing 20% more damage just out of nowhere, basically, which is really nice. So they kind of bounce off of each other. If you're questioning this trait here too, I will explain my reasoning. While attuned to water, your spells deal 20% more damage to vulnerable foes. I've explained this before on the Churning Earth build. Basically, what you can do is activate an ability and then swap into a water achievement before it lands, and you'll get that benefit from that trait because you're in water achievement when it strikes. So, for the purposes of this build, I don't do that with Churning Earth so much. I do it with Fire Grab, but you can do it with Churning Earth too. So I'll demonstrate to you guys. I'll Flame Rush in on this guy, and now we're gonna Fire Grab. And we're going to go into water achievement, and that did 5,000 damage to him. It should have done more, I think, because I don't know whether he had vulnerability on him. I think we might have got a little bit unlucky there. But basically, they're going to have vulnerability on them because of our 25 in air magic, and we're going to be able to go into water achievement during the casting of our spells. Combined with our sigil, this is also particularly powerful. The sigil of intelligence, your next attack after swapping to this weapon while in combat has 100% critical chance, because what it means is I start the Fire Grab and then I swap into water achievement, which procs the sigil, which means the Fire Grab is guaranteed to crit, which boosts the damage massively. You're going to be hitting about 9,000 damage with this thing on a good hit with it, and you're going into water achievement at the same time. It all lines up nicely. There's some really nice weird mechanical synergy that goes on with this as well, because we can't go into air achievement to proc that sigil because the air achievement will then strike the lightning bolt down and then it will waste the sigil. We'll try it again on this guy. We'll go that. I didn't even get the Fire Grab off. He was dead already. What I'm doing here is I'm popping these two offensive skills too, which recharge very quickly, as I'll show you in my traits. I'm popping these early because that's going to boost my critical damage even further for when the Fire Grab actually lands. You see, so it all triggers. If you've just engaged on a large group, you might want to then use Arcane Shield too, because then you'll get that extra bit of defense and a big nuke as well on the heels of it. I'll explain my decisions for which arcane skills we're going to use in a minute. But yeah, okay, so that's War Achievement. Lastly, we've got Arcane. On the offensive version, which you're currently looking at, we only go 20 into this. On the defensive version, we'll be going 30 into this, and I'll show you that setup too. But for this, we're going with, you know, you have to, in my opinion, Elemental Attunement, incredibly important trait. Boons when you swap achievements. The minors are nice, a little bit more fury here. And then, of course, for this slot here, you've got a couple of choices. I like to go with Arcane Skills Recharge 20% faster. That knocks the cooldowns on your abilities really low. Okay, so here we've got 30 plus 20, 50-second total cooldown, plus 75 is 125-second cooldown, essentially. But just by taking this trait, I know the maths doesn't exactly work out here, but I'm just doing this to demonstrate you the amount of seconds you save overall. But if we do take this trait, where is it? There it is, it's number 1, I always forget. We go from 125 seconds to just 102. It just means that some of these, particularly Arcane Blast, every 16 seconds you can pop this. It's a really nice trait to take, especially if all your utilities are going to be this. So yeah, I call this a bit of an Arcane Elementalist because it plays off of this fact that you can build very high crit damage, very low crit chance, only 23%. Of course, in fights, though, that goes up to 43% because of Fury. And you do get to maintain that Fury. It will last a very long time. Basically it means that we're always going to be critting regardless because of our sigil and because of how arcane skills work. What you don't want to do is have the sigil procced and then use an arcane skill, because the arcane skill's gonna crit anyway, so I can use that, but now I've like doubled up on my crits there. What's the point in doing that? Like, it's only gonna crit once. And you're just not going to get the extra benefit out of it. So there's a little bit of learning to have, there's a little bit of skill that you need to use with this build. Actually, you need to monitor when your sigil is going to proc and when to use your arcane skills and when not to. But with a really good engage, what you can do is you can pre-proc the sigil by getting into combat, say, against anything, full damage, whatever you want, and then just swap achievements. And what this done is procced my sigil without me actually being fighting anything. So what I can do is now open up an encounter with an enemy with the sigil procced. This is kind of the magic of the build. And this is procced, so my next attack will be critical. The really nice thing is, underneath that, this sigil has already like recharged, so I can actually get 2 back to back. If I do a flame rush and crit someone, sorry, a burning speed. I always say this the wrong name for this. I don't know why. If I use a burning speed and crit with it, then I launch a fire grab and swap attunement, I'll get a fire grab that will guaranteed crit on the heels of a burning speed that guarantees a crit, which is really nice. Combined with 2 arcane abilities that are guaranteed crits and boosting my crit damage, you can see how the engages can be quite strong. So I'll try and get a fire grab off. Hopefully this guy won't die too quickly. There you go. So we did 10,174 damage to that guy just on an opening. That was 4 skills. Only 2 of our weapon skills have been used. You might think, well, isn't that a waste, perhaps, because you've already left fire achievement? Now, I am playing with the idea, the only other skill that you really want to hang about for could be this Ring of Fire. What you could do is Flame Rush in, and while you're popping your arcane skills, because you want to pop those early so that you don't trigger so they don't pop the sigil instead of the Flame Grab, if that makes sense. While you're using your arcane skills, potentially you could then Ring of Fire and then swap into the Fire Grab, so you can get your full fire nuke out, but it's not really necessary. You're doing so much damage with this thing, it's beside the point. So it's a very strong engage, and then you always from then on have this very high chance to crit, because you're about every other attack is going to be critting, something like that, just under every other attack because of your values on your crit chance with Fury up. You've got this and they're going to be very, very meaty hits. You can keep running around and doing plenty of damage, and through this just kind of very simple combination of using water attunement when you have your big hits coming, you can do an awful lot. Really, the magic of this build is combining that Sigil of Intelligence with that water magic trait. I'll demonstrate to you guys here what it's like to do the Churning Earth nuke on this setup. So we're going to start our Churning Earth. We're going to swap into Water Attunement. It's going to crit him for 7,000 damage. I hadn't used any of my other abilities there, though, to boost the crit damage early. So very big AoE, heavy hitting attacks that will be coming out of just you playing. Now, the difference that you might notice from this between my Churning Earth Spiker build is this is Dagger Dagger instead of Scepter Dagger. Scepter, I've gone in a big circle. I first liked Dagger Dagger, then I like Scepter Dagger. I've kind of learnt a lot while I've been doing TPVP stuff, and I will very much say I much prefer Dagger Dagger. Dagger Dagger is so much easier to learn your bursts. It's also very important because this actually provides an aura for Fury, which unfortunately Scepter doesn't provide. I really do look at Scepter as a much more defensive build. Also, Scepter will kind of have you on the backline a little bit more, and the main problem there is 2 of these skills, your arcane skills, are kind of built around you being close up. Arcane Shield, in particular, relies on people to hit you and then does AoE damage around you, as does Arcane Wave. The Scepter is not so conducive. You will do good damage with the Scepter, without a doubt, but if you're going with Scepter, then, for example, your nuke on Scepter, as I'll show you here, I want to get more into this discussion later, but your new conceptor, Phoenix, if you've pre-procced your sigil, Phoenix, to do its full burst, you really want to get 3 quick hits out of it. And the sigil will only proc 1. That's why on the Churning Earth build it was better, because I used Arcane Power. Because with Arcane Power you can do something like that. I've missed him completely there. But with Arcane Power you can make sure you crit on a lot of these different hits. I wasn't even targeting him. And it's kind of strong, but I don't know, I much prefer dagger for the purposes of this build. I feel like the nukes are much stronger, they're much quicker in hitting, you don't have to wait for a phoenix to go out and come back, and they're much more reliable. Same with the dragon's tooth, you don't have to be sitting about with your thumb up your ass waiting for things to happen. So yeah, I will now show you guys what I play with if I go into really high-end fractals. Like, how do I change this build up if I really need a lot of defense? Because this does have a reasonable amount of defense. It's got some nice toughness values to it. And I'll show you that variation in just 1 second. I'll go retrait. Okay, hello! Magically, we're also in a new location. I thought I'd change it up a little bit. So, the main difference here with the build is it's exactly the same gear, everything's the same. I just shift 10 points. I shift 10 points out of water magic, and I shift them into arcane for the defense. This trait, the evasive arcana, deal like an elemental ability on dodge, is unbelievably overpowered. It's the most ridiculous thing like you would have ever seen. So here, look, I've just been jumped, and by dodging, look at how much I just healed myself up for. So I'm now back up at 100% health. This thing is so strong. I didn't actually mean for that to happen, but I suppose it's quite helpful. That trait is just unbelievable. Not just for helping yourself survive, but when you're in difficult team environments, this will splash out big heals that cure conditions on many of your allies around you. This is very, very powerful, and also you can get some minor effectiveness out of dodging in other achievements. Very strong. What have I sacrificed here? I've sacrificed 10 points in water magic. The extra 100 healing power doesn't account for that much. Neither does the vitality, so it's not a big problem to go back down 10 points out of that tree there. I want to change this skill back to what it should be. Here we go. So it doesn't matter too much, but what you will lose out on is first the trait that means you do 20% more damage while in water magic, which means that you're not going to be getting such big water achievement spikes. You'll still be swapping achievements into water magic to proc crits out of things, and you'll still probably go into water magic for your fire grabs or earth magic for your fire grabs, but you just won't. You'll miss out on that a little bit of extra damage. Further, you'll miss out on more damage, the more significant damage, consistent damage through the bountiful power, 2% more damage for each boon on you. That's a very powerful trait. It's the most powerful 25 trait you can get for an Elementalist, honestly. The one for fire magic is only 5% more damage. The one for earth magic seems bugged. In my tests, I cannot get this to increase my damage output whatsoever. And in practice, when you're actually out there fighting, you will have been dodging. You won't have full endurance, so that pretty much means nothing. Weak spot is very strong, but obviously we spec'd into that too. And in the condition video, we talked about why arcane precision isn't too good, in my humble opinion. So yeah, this is a very powerful thing, but I've taken the 10 points out of water magic. You could take the 10 points out of air magic if you really wanted to, but you would lose out on the vulnerability, which means that then you're not going to be able to proc the 20% anyway, unless then further you take another change which makes your arcane skills cause vulnerability. So it changes the build quite a bit if you take the 10 out, and then you're not doing so much crit damage in the first place. So I wouldn't recommend it. If you followed my train of thought there, I wouldn't recommend it so much. I like to stay in the air magic so that I still do get my nice comfortable 100%, 110% when I've eaten my my consumable. So yeah, I've basically taken those out and put them into arcane. Don't put them in earth, don't put them in fire. The damage that fire gives you is negligible. It's funny, like you'd expect fire to offer the most damage, but it really doesn't. Like the only time I ever considered fire was for a condition build. What does that say? So yeah, I wouldn't put it in there. I would just stick them in arcane. This is a very strong trait, and really you're good to go for fractals. Hopefully I will have been cutting in footage of, you know, successful fractal bursts and things while using this build, or maybe I'll put out a video later. For the utilities, you do have choices too, but this is generally what I'd go for, and that's frankly the build, guys. The rest of the video, I just want to talk about a couple of things some of you more intelligent people for the Elementalist in particular might be wondering why I haven't gone with differences and what changes you might be able to make. So I would just like to go through the key ones here. I wrote down some notes of things that I have considered myself and why I haven't gone for them. So first of all, just look at traits and differences you can go with for the traits. Number one, why do we only go 25 into air, not 30 into air? On the original setup, let's imagine, so we're 25 back in water here. Well, the final slot for air isn't useful. It's not that great. Grounded looks very, very nice, but it's very conditional. And again, this is one of those things I just don't see it doing much more damage. I really don't. The most I've ever considered using this is for a Conjure Lightning Hammer build, which would be quite interesting. But yeah, so not very strong. The Grandmaster traits here aren't that great. Tempest Defense, for a long time, I never never understood why this was even in the game. But now I kind of see, if you want to run a really glassy Elementalist for PvP sakes, this can be a really nice choice, because it will help you get away from a lot of things when you get caught with your trousers down. But even then, it's bad, because the cooldown is 90 seconds. It's terrible. If you think about it, all that's doing is applying an aura on us once every 90 seconds that we get every 25 seconds on our weapon. I mean, what? It's a bit rubbish. So, yeah, there's not that much to pick for air magic, really, going 30, and it will give you a little bit of extra crit damage and precision, which is nice, but that's the only reason I'd ever go for it. And what little it gives you there, 5% crit damage, is not enough to make up for the fact of Bountiful Power. Bountiful Power, you're always going to have at least 3 boons on you. 2 because of Fury and Swiftness, because we will always have those from our auras, and at least 1 more because we're swapping attunements. A lot of the time, you'll have 4 boons on you at all times. 4 boons, that's 8% damage. That's already outshining what the air magic does. Plus, it allows us to go further into water magic for more healing power, more vitality. It's better to go for Bountiful Power than to go 30 into air. In any situation, I would say. In any situation. If going 30 air is just not viable to me at all for an Elementalist right now. So that's why I don't go 30 into air. Why don't we then, you might be wondering, go 30 into water? Because we're 25 in water, why not there? It's because I hate coming so far out of air magic. I feel like Zephyr's Boon is guaranteed a must, and the only other choice you really have in air magic is there's 2 particular traits that would be quite nice. Don't go for 10% more damage while attuned to air. It's not worth it if you're doing the 20% more damage while in water. But you can either go with more critical hit damage when you use arcane skills, which I feel like is more comfortable because it has more synergy, or you can go with a bolt to the heart, which makes you deal a lot more damage to people when they're low on health. This is pretty much a useless trait for any regular enemies in the overworld, and on my offensive build I'd never use it, because you just don't need that extra damage. If they're that low to dying, you can pretty much just say it doesn't matter. However, in difficult situations, even in the overworld, I suppose, against very difficult bosses that last a long time, this can be an incredibly powerful trait. But what I like to do, honestly, is run with the Arcane Lightning trait. And then if I know that a big difficult boss is coming up, or I'm, slamming my head against the keyboard for 5 minutes trying to kill one of these difficult bosses, it's very easy, no matter what situation you're in, to break aggro and just put this trait on, and then you can benefit from that extra consistent damage in it towards the end, and then swap it back. That's what I do. It depends how much you, as a player of Guild Wars 2, are willing to swap things in and out, but that's how I play. I swap a lot of utilities out as well, if you're wondering about different options for utilities. I don't run Arcane Power anymore because A, I'm not on Scepter, which benefits from it a lot more, and B, because of this sigil that's now fixed, the Sigil of Intelligence, you can use that to get the crits when you want them and land your big hits rather than Arcane Power, and then you can just get flat up more damage out of using different arcane skills. Arcane Shield, you might be thinking, well, why not use Arcane Power instead of Shield? Shield is very strong. It's incredibly defensive. It will help you in a lot of situations where you just need to block stuff, basically, for like when you're channeling things. But also it does a lot of damage. It's the tooltip damage that these state is actually incorrect, because it scales off of your weapons when it actually uses a different formula. It's a lot of damage. Think of it as another arcane wave. Really do, because when you're in big situations where lots of things hit you, you basically trigger it, you mitigate a bit of damage, and then you basically cast Arcane Wave that does slightly less damage. It's very, very strong. So I like Arcane Shield. It's got a long cooldown, but then so does Arcane Power, a much longer cooldown actually. So maybe that's a bit of an option if you want to go for it, but I don't know. I don't really like balancing all of that stuff around. It's totally up to you though if you wanted to swap that. As for utilities, I've talked myself at the point. As for utilities, I probably will be putting up a video of me playing through fractals on this specific build, high fractals, and I will show you guys every single time I swap my utility skills out, because there's at least 2 swaps you can do in every single different one. I want to put out a kind of a bit of a guide on that, because I think that would be really helpful for a lot of Elementalists. You'd be surprised how easy you can make content when you start swapping your skills out, specifically for the encounters that are coming up. So yeah, with that said, let's go back to other choices you go with for your traits. You might be wondered, why are we in Arcane at all? It doesn't provide any real damage stuff. It's because Evasive Arcana is so strong. You do have another choice here. If you are 25 into water magic, you could get rid of Arcane skills recharge faster. You could get rid of that and instead take the trait that gives you Vigor on crits. Now, that still kind of plays into the whole critting theme of this video, of this build, But at the same time, that will then proc your 25 trait, and you're basically, instead of having 3 guaranteed boons on you all the time, you will have 4, because Vigor will stack very, very high on you. And then you'll have 5 and 6, and there'll be times where you even have 7, which is a significant amount of damage. You know, we're talking about 14% more damage just while you're fighting. It's very, very strong. So you could go with the Vigor if you wanted. It's a very nice source of Vigor for Elementalist, and the Vigor helps you dodge, which has more synergy with the 30 in Arcane, but then of course that would mean shuffling things around slightly more, so you're 25 in Water and 30 in Arcane. That's another option for you there. You also might think, well, with 3 Arcane skills, why have we gone 30 into Arcane and we're not taking the trait that is specifically for Arcane skills? This is madness. This is the one that I discussed a little bit in the condition build. It will inflict different conditions based on your achievement. Basically, the only reason you want to go this far into Arcane, honestly, is for the defense. There's no point. You'll get more damage out by just going 20 and then buffing up into Bountiful Power than you ever will from trying to use these. The strongest condition that you will get out of this Elemental Surge trait is the Immobilize from Earth, which isn't being boosted in any way from our gear or our traits here, so it will only last for 1 second. The utility is questionable at best, especially in PvE. Just don't do it, is what I'd say. I don't see the point in rolling for that. I guess Joe Fast is under attack and we get to defend it a little bit. So yeah, don't go with that. I know it seems like it should be a nice fit. It's a sad thing with Guild Wars 2 that a lot of things look like they should be nice fits, and because of the way they've been implemented in the game, the builds just aren't viable. And it's a real shame. I had a very strong, tightly packed bunker build that seemed to be perfect in the way the traits worked off of each other, but it just wasn't good enough compared to how strong Evasive Arcana is and stuff like that. So yeah, stick with Evasive Arcana, I would say. Why aren't we in Fire Magic? I kind of explained before. The power isn't that good because it's better to scale your damage up through just actual percentage-based boosts rather than anything else. And why are we Auras grant Fury and Swiftness? It's for the Fury and Swiftness. Well, why else? It's because it's got great synergy with the Bountiful Power, and the Fury itself is incredibly useful as far as this build's concerned. So that's all I could really think of that people might question in terms of traits. We'll kill a couple more of these guys. I'm not really looking at the screen at the moment. I'm looking at Notepad. So if I'm playing badly, it's because of that. We'll set him on fire. So that one was a 7k spike, but you know, it was just out of nowhere. Right, so what else can we do? Well, you might be looking at runes. I am using runes of the Scholar. Crit damage runes, I would definitely recommend use crit damage runes. That narrows your options down a lot. Flat power runes are okay. This gives power and crit damage. I actually don't think these are the best runes you could go for. I think that the best are probably runes of the Divinity. So if you're sat there wondering about those, then good on you, because those probably are the best. Go with runes of the Divinity. I think they're very strong. However, the 6 on these has really nice synergy with water magic, which is why I go for those. The only other one I would really consider is runes of the Ogre, which again are crit damage, but the 6 on that it summons a rock dog for you, which, if we're really talking about difficult encounters, is just going to die very quickly and not be useful to you whatsoever. Ogre is really only strong for like 1v1 spec PvP builds, which don't have a place at all anyway in the game. So yeah, I wouldn't go with Ogre whatsoever. That's all I really have to say about the runes. As for weapons, just very briefly, why are we dagger? Why aren't we staff? Well, because the sigil we're using, the sigil of intelligence, this thing will only crit on one attack, and the staff has so much multi-hit stuff going on that you really don't see the benefits of it. It doesn't come out, it doesn't shine very well. So there, you can see some nice big hits going off there. God, I lost the thread of what I was saying there while I was picking up loot. So the staff doesn't really go very well. I find the staff to be very conditional. I think you guys know my opinion on the staff quite well by now. I don't think it's the greatest weapon in the game. I really don't. I think it's fantastic for world versus world, but that's about it. So I don't use staff, which means we're going to have a main hand, offhand set up. Well, what do we want in the offhand? Focus or dagger? Go dagger. Focus is too defensive for PvE. It's not useful whatsoever, so ignore that. And then obviously the main hand question, I've already kind of explained why I think you could go Scepter if you really wanted. Just swap out the Arcane Shield, I would say, for Arcane Power, and then you'll probably have an easier time with it, and it might be a little bit more fun for you. Scepter I consider to be a far more defensive weapon, though, even though the base stats on it are higher in terms of damage. It's up to you guys, but Dagger is the way I play this, mainly because of the nice big engaged spikes. Can you see here how I've got this procced, and I didn't even really mean to on the heels of the last fight? That will happen all the time. So we're primed for a kill when we go in. Like, for example, this Risen Abomination here. By the way, these guys look awesome since the update. They look so cool. Right, okay, so that's weapons. What else did I want to say? Sigils, yes, sigils. I've got a superior sigil of 4s here. If you don't want to do like a weird weapon swapping thing like I do, where I'll stack up Bloodlust and then swap onto my other weapon, just go with Bloodlust. Bloodlust will give you much higher damage overall because it boosts your power, namely, far higher than it otherwise could be, which will then scale your critical damage much nicer. Or you could go for both like I do, which is where you get to have your cake and eat it too. You get to have the full stacks, and then you swap into the new weapon, and you get the 5% damage. And then a Sigil of Intelligence, which is super cheap on the trading post, I think, because not many people really appreciate their strength. Obviously, if you take that out of the build, you're going to have to make substantial changes to the rest of it. I think that this Sigil, since it got fixed, is really what binds the whole build together and really makes it work quite nicely. That's about it, guys. The heal skill, for Dagger, I would always go with a Signet of Restoration because, especially on our more defensive setup, we've got, you notice how we're still 15 in Water Magic? That's very important. Healing Ripple will heal us massively when we go into Water Attunement. A single dodge will then heal us even further, and before we know it, we're back up at 100% health. And the Signet just helps us continue to keep that up, and it keeps us measured up without having to stop to cast things. I've really begun to appreciate the power of Ether Renewal in PvP, but there aren't many conditions in PvE, and you're sat about doing nothing while you're channeling it in PvE, so I wouldn't go with it. Glyph, you could do if you really wanted, but the Signet's probably the best bet. And yeah, the Elites are pretty much the exact same situation as they've ever been. Go with the Glyph of Elementals, except for specific stuff. Now, yeah, as I say, do expect a video in the future of me going through fractals with this build. You'll see its strength more. This is kind of my normal build for that, and it will have a real focus on when and where you should swap your utilities out, because there are some incredibly powerful things Elementalists can do in those. You just need to know when to swap into different things, and I feel like I've really hit the nail on the head with those now. So yeah, that's about it, guys. Thanks very much for watching. I know this ended up long again, but hey, it wouldn't be a Wooden Potatoes build video without it being as long as shit. So thanks very much. I hope you enjoy. Do give it a shot. Let me know what you think, and I will see you next time. See you next time, everybody.